Hey guys, my name is Muhammad Afshin, and today I will be talking to you guys about what Pure Land Buddhism is, its origins, influences, and the transformations it underwent to become the Japanese Pure Land Buddhism that we know today. The goal of Pure Land Buddhism was to attain admission into the land of Amida. It advocated to let go of the dirty things of this world to become reborn in the paradise of the Amida Buddha. All followers had to do was to recite the Nembutsu, Namu Amida Butsu, which means praise be to Amida Buddha, and they would be reborn in the paradise after death. From Genshin's Ojoyushu, the Pure Land was a place where the ear was delighted with fragrance, and the eye with drifting blossoms, crystal pools, golden palaces, and exquisite raiment. An idealized counterpart, we might say, of the Heian capital. The belief of Pure Land Buddhism gave birth to new music, dances, literature, and artwork appreciating the beauty of the Pure Land. So now I'll talk to you guys about the emergence of Pure Land Buddhism and where it came from. So in traditional Chinese Buddhism, having faith in Amida became a very strong theme. However, the faith in Amida was mostly a supplicant to other teachings within Chinese Buddhist schools, meaning it was never its own standalone concept, rather an accessory of sorts. However, an independent cult was formed that made the Pure Land faith as the only true form of worship through the works of a Chinese monk named Shan Tao. Shan Tao advocated the importance of sutra chantings, meditations, image worship, the presentation of offerings, and he recognized the recitation of Amida's name as a primary form of worship. So prior to Pure Land teaching becoming its own separate belief, it was still spoken about in a much smaller scale. For example, in the Nara period, people used to pray to Amida Buddha so that their deceased loved ones could achieve enlightenment. The first traces of Pure Land thought in Japan dated in 848 when the Tendai scholar Ennin, also referred to as Jikaku Daishi, arrived from China to the Todo Temple complex in the Heian Mountains. In China, he studied under Fa Chao. He learned a combination of Shan Tao's teaching on the recitation of Amida's names and meditation practices. Once he arrived, he built the Jogyo Zenmaido, or the Jogyodo Temple complex in the mountains of Heian. At this time, the Jogyodo did not preach ways to directly get into the Pure Land, rather how to focus one's mental and physical activities on the Amida Buddha. Examples of this were the Jogyo Zenmai, a common Tendai meditation technique, and the Fudan Nembutsu, or the uninterrupted contemplation of the Amida Buddha. In around 950, Pure Land faith was its own separate subject rather than being like a mere part of other Buddhist schools. Genshin, another Tendai monk, was revered and known for his learning and knowledge with over 80 works to his name. In 985, Genshin believed in Mappo, which was a period of irreversible spiritual decline. This age was also referred to as the age of the latter Dharma. Genshin claimed that Pure Land Buddhism was a solution to this age of spiritual decline where other forms of practice were simply ineffective. So to understand why Genshin proposed that Pure Land Buddhism was a solution to this age of Mappo, it's essential that we figure out exactly what Mappo was. So in traditional Buddhism, there are divisions of time, and the three main ways of dividing time was the theory of the three ages, which was based on the death of a Buddha. Number two, which was a theory of the 5 periods, which showed the deterioration of human abilities, and the theory of the 5 defilements, in which the world is defiled by impurities. And if you'd like, you can pause the video right here and read these excerpts from an article by Michelle Mara called The Development of Mappo Thought in Japan. But I'm going to continue so you can figure out what Mappo is. So if you look at this slide right here, this figure is from that same article by Michelle Mara, and the numbers on the top tell us which sutra each time frame is sourced from. So each different sutra that mentioned this theory of 3 ages had like a slightly different number in terms of like years after the Buddha's death, after Shobo, after Zabo and stuff. And so Mappo's origins was traced back to China when the Chinese emperors were in strong opposition to the upcoming prevalence of Buddhism. Chinese monks could feel this like decline of Buddhist teachings and developed a consciousness of being in a sort of final age. This period in 574 marked Buddhist suppression, the confiscation and destruction of Buddhist temples, statues, and sutras. So, this terrible period was attributed to Mappo, the age of the latter Dharma. In response to this age, two primary schools of thought advocated true methods of salvation: the sect of the Three Stages by Sin Sing, and the Pure Land school led by Tao Cho and Shan Tao. Both of these schools taught different things, but both taught methods for ignorant people to attain salvation. The Three Stages sect was a development of a universal Buddhism in which prejudices and views of other sects were removed. The Pure Land school preached the familiar concepts of reciting the Nembutsu. Before Genshin preached Pure Land Buddhism as a solution to Mappo, a Chinese monk, Tao Cho, one of the founders of the Pure Land school, shared the belief that Mappo and believed that this Pure Land teaching was the only way of achieving enlightenment in this age. This is sourced from Anlo Chi, which is a collection of essays on the Western Paradise. And in Genshin's work, he actually attributed disputes among monks, war, famine, and natural calamities to the age of Mappo, and he mentions that the people were in a state of ignorance and other forms of practice would be ineffective in achieving salvation. So, why was a new form of Buddhism even needed? Tao Cho's Enlo Chi says that the Buddhist doctrine has no meaning if it is not fit to the time of the listeners to which it is addressed. This quote from Genshin reads, "Teachings and practices in order to be born in the Pure Land are the most important things in this final age of defilements. Who, either among monks or laymen, noblemen or commoners, is not going to follow this way? But many are the Buddhist teachings, esoteric and exoteric, which aren't necessarily the same. Many are the practical and the theoretical ways of meditation on Buddha and on his Pure Land. Wise people, excellent people, earnest in their devotion, won't find any difficulty to undertake these practices. But for a foolish being like myself, how is it possible to bear them? Therefore I assembled important passages from holy scriptures and Buddhist treatises elucidating the practices of Nembutsu. I think that, looking at these quotations, it will be easier to understand these teachings and less difficult to undertake such practices." So this quote was found in the preface of the Ojoyushu, and in this, Genshin actually refers to himself as one of these foolish beings. So what basically what this is saying is the people that can get away with practicing the normal traditional Buddhist practices in this age of the latter Dharma were these incredibly hardcore Buddhists, and that the average person was nowhere near that level of devotion. And in his last sentence he says, looking at these quotations, it will be easier to understand these teachings and less difficult to undertake such practices. It kind of shows his intention of making the Ojoyushu and preaching Pure Land Buddhism as an easier form of achieving enlightenment. Genshin describes the way to the Pure Land as a five-fold practice of Nembutsu, including the worship of Amida, Raihai, praise, Sandan, vow, Sagan, meditation, Kanzatsu, and merit dedication, Eiko. But Genshin did realize that this five-fold path was still hard for the average person to follow, considering that they would have to remember Amida for every second of every day. And if you look at the definitions of the praise, vow, meditation, merit dedication, it is very extensive and requires a lot of effort. But Genshin wrote a quote from Shantao in the Ojoyushu: "The obstacle of evil in ordinary beings makes difficult the accomplishment of meditational Nembutsu. Therefore the Buddha, moved to pity, advised them to simply intone the syllables of his name." So this quote is saying basically just say the syllables of Amida's name and you're good to go. But Genshin still emphasized the grand reward of following this five-fold path as being much higher than just simply intoning Amida's name. In the 13th century, Honen, a Tendai monk who studied at Mount Hiei, believed that achieving enlightenment was impossible. He explicitly rejected the idea of moving towards enlightenment because it was just too hard. Honen rejected traditional Pure Land Buddhism, deeming his works radical. Because of the nature of his thoughts, he kept his thoughts a secret while posing as a traditional Tendai monk to everybody else. However, in 1198, he finally wrote the Senshaku Hongan Nembutsu Shu for a small group of people, but the word ended up getting out. which resulted in a lot of outrage from other traditional monks who ended up petitioning to ban Honen's teachings. In his book, it's said to throw out all the beliefs except for one, the recitation of the name of Amida Buddha. So in contrast to what Genshin had wrote earlier, Honen believed that everything, including meditation, statues, prayers, images, and Genshin's fivefold path to enlightenment, were all useless, and that the recitation of the Nembutsu was the one and only legitimate way to achieve enlightenment in the quoted terrible times that he lived in. But now he had to prove to everybody that what he was saying was indeed correct, and he had to prove that using old texts. So what he ended up doing was taking a bunch of passages that said that reciting the Nembutsu was the best practice, and then Honen argued, well, if it's the best practice, then why do we need to bother doing all the other stuff? And this ended up getting a lot of followers, but also subject to a lot of criticism by a lot of other people. After Honen passed away, his followers started arguing with each other over how much practice was needed and how much faith was needed. So, the practice side was led by Shinran, who started the Jodo Shinshu, also known as the True Pure Land School. And Shinran was a pretty chill guy. He ended up actually breaking his vow of celibacy and marrying a woman and having kids with her, and believed that faith alone was enough for admission into Amida's paradise. Whereas Ippen, who led the practice side, believed that only practice was essential for getting admission into Amida's paradise. He started a school called Jishu, known as the Time School. Pure Land thought underwent many transformations to become the Pure Land Buddhism we know today. Pure Land Buddhism evolved from being a mere part of traditional Chinese Buddhist teachings into its own standalone belief system through the work of Shantao and Tao Chou. Enin brought Pure Land thought to Japan and preached how to focus one's physical and mental activities on Amida, and Genshin claimed that Pure Land Buddhism was a solution to the age of Mappo. Honen, frustrated with the complexity of Buddhism, made Pure Land Buddhism a separate school of Buddhism and preached that it was the only way of achieving enlightenment. And after his death, his followers developed two other schools from the Jodo Shu, the Pure Land School, and further simplified his teachings. Thank you for listening.